Hi, I'm Robert Van Valkenburgh at Kogen Dojo. We just finished CPR, AED, first aid training here, and I have Ryan Killough here who taught the class, and he is a paramedic and nurse over on the Eastern Shore.
Yes.
And Carol McDermott, who's here, she is an advocate for AEDs all over the state of Maryland, and I'm going to talk to them a little bit about what they do, about AEDs, and about kind of the story behind how we got here at Kogen Dojo with the AEDs, with the training and everything. So, Ryan, how long have you been a paramedic for?
Just over 25 years.
Okay. And where do you work?
I work as a nurse mostly at Queen Anne's Emergency Center, University of Maryland freestanding ER on the Eastern Shore.
Okay. And you also sell and teach how to use AEDs?
So my company is Heart Rescue LLC, and we teach first aid CPR classes and sell automatic external defibrillators.
Okay. And how did you and Carol meet?
Carol and I met because I was a friend of her husband's who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago from a sudden cardiac arrest event.
And for those of you that don't know, Carol's husband was my first martial art teacher, Joe Shea. He was my Hapkido instructor who I got my black belt under, and Carol's his wife, and like Ryan said, he passed away a couple years ago from a heart attack while he was working at as a bouncer at a bar over on the Eastern Shore, and they didn't have an AED. There was nobody there to resuscitate him, and by the time the paramedics got there, it was too late, and that kind of started this whole discussion. Carol, how did you get into being an advocate for AEDs?
Well, shortly after Joe had a sudden cardiac arrest, Ryan and I were talking because he was in the ER when they brought Joe in and was attending to Joe and also trying to help me. And a couple of weeks later, I was brought to the emergency room because I was dehydrated and just struggling with Joe's death. And I asked the nurse if Ryan was on duty, and she said no, he wasn't. So she must have picked up the phone and called, and lo and behold, Ryan shows up and spends the night helping me in the ER. And we got to talking, and I started to understand about AEDs and how it increases your chances of survival if you do have a sudden cardiac arrest. And I thought, well, why aren't they everywhere? Why doesn't everybody have one? So Ryan and I have been working together to try to get Maryland to pass some legislation to place more AEDs, and we've just become dear friends through this. And AEDs are inexpensive, easy to use, and save a life. My husband received his first shock at 11 minutes, and after 10 minutes there's almost no chance of survival. So even though there was a state trooper and a nurse right there who immediately started compressions and started CPR, he needed that shock. So we're hoping to get the word out, and Robert has been kind enough to install one of the AEDs in his dojo and train his staff how to use them.
Yeah, thanks. And Ryan, why is an AED so important in addition to CPR? Why is CPR not enough?
Right. So CPR is obviously great. It's a great skill to have. It's great to start it immediately in an event that someone collapses with sudden cardiac arrest. But CPR buys time until someone can get defibrillated. So paramedics obviously have the defibrillators and the ER has them. But the issue is when someone collapses and is in cardiac arrest, for every minute that passes before they get defibrillated, the chances of surviving decrease by 10% per minute. So the national average for EMS response time is 10 to 12 minutes, which is past the window for a successful resuscitation. So AEDs can be used hopefully within the first 5 minutes and give the person up to a 70 or 80% chance of survival if you have an AED nearby.
And we had training on the AED, but do you have to have training in order to be able to use it?
You don't. I mean, it's nice to have training for CPR and AED, but these things are easier to use than any simple infant toy or toddler toy. You turn it on, you listen, it talks to you, it tells you everything, you do what it says to do, and you can't hurt anybody with them, and you really can't go wrong. So you don't. It's nice to have formal training, but it's not necessary.
So you said you cannot hurt somebody with one. So there's no risk of shocking someone who doesn't need to be shocked.
Right. Absolutely not. So people, that's one reason people are scared of the AED, because they think they're going to push a button to shock somebody who doesn't need to be shocked. And it's quite opposite. The machine determines what rhythm the person is in. It determines if the person needs to be shocked, and it tells you just to push the shock button. So you can't shock someone who doesn't need to be shocked.
Okay. So what are some other myths around the AED that people, cause people to not have them or not
Sure.
use them, something like that?
I think there's three main things. I think people worry about liability. Like, I don't want to have this machine and I hurt somebody with it, or I don't use it, or it malfunctions. Unfortunately, we're in a litigious society, so people are worried about lawsuits. And the good news is that we have laws that protect you from being held liable if you have an AED. If you use it, if you don't use it, the law is protected. It's called the Good Samaritan Act, that keeps you from being held liable in any first aid or cardiac arrest situation.
Okay. So there's no legal risk around it?
No legal risk around it. The other thing people are worried about is the cost. You can get these for $1,000, $1,500 range. They last forever because they're a low use. So they're a little expensive, but I'm not saving someone's life, so I don't think you can put a price on that. So people worry about hurting someone. You can't. They worry about being held liable. You can't be. And if you think $1,000 is a lot of money, it is. But it's going to last you 20 years, and you have the peace of mind of knowing you can save somebody's life with this machine.
Right. So you have legislation that you're trying to get passed. What exactly is it about? What is the bill called, and how far has that gone?
I've been trying, Ryan and I have been trying for the last 3 years to get legislation to have large restaurants install them. There's a high percentage of people who pass in restaurants, who have sudden cardiac arrest in restaurants. Joe was at a restaurant when he passed. And so we're just trying to work with the legislature and the Restaurant Association to get more installed, both because, well, yes, a lot of sudden cardiac arrests happen in restaurants, but if you know that a large restaurant's going to have an AED and you're just walking down the street, or you live near one, or you're in a car and somebody goes into sudden cardiac arrest, and you know the large restaurants have to have them, then there they are. I can't imagine how many lives it will save. So the bill was very popular in the Senate. They named it after my husband, the Joseph Shea Act. Passed easily through the Senate, and it just got stuck in a House committee. But I don't give up easily, and I know Ryan doesn't give up easily. Joe would not have given up easily. So we are going back again this year to attempt to convince one or two people that this is an incredibly important piece of legislation that will save many lives in Maryland. It would place somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 AEDs around the state of Maryland.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about with AEDs, either one of you, and before we get going?
I just would encourage everyone to know what an AED is, know how important they are. You really don't have much greater than a 5% chance of surviving a sudden cardiac arrest without an AED being nearby. You can't hurt anybody with it. They're not that expensive. You can't be held liable. So know CPR, know what an AED does, and advocate for them.
Thanks. Carol?
Yeah, there is the Good Samaritan Law, which covers all medical issues in the state of Maryland, but there's also very specific AED laws that protects people from using or not using an AED as they wish to try to help somebody, whether they succeed or they fail. You are protected both by the Good Samaritan Law and by the AED law. And so, an AED, I also think of, what we're trying to do here is access, educate, defibrillate. That's what we need to do, and that's what Robert is helping us do, and that is what Ryan is helping us do. So,
and I just would like to thank Robert for getting an AED for his facility. We just trained his staff. I use it. We spent hours, and he has an AED here, and that's what we need, more people to step up to the plate and do.
So for context, when does somebody actually use an AED?
Sure. So when someone collapses or you find someone who's unresponsive, not waking up, that's the person you want to start CPR on and obtain an AED to possibly defibrillate them.
And what would the order be for that? Like, someone collapses, what do you do?
All right, so if someone collapses, first thing you want to do is call 911. You want to know if there's an AED nearby and obtain that. Start CPR with compressions and apply and use the AED as soon as possible.
Cool. So, thank you very much, and thanks for the training. Thank you for helping us get this. Carol was kind enough to donate it to Kogen Dojo in Joe's memory, and we're happy to be here providing a service to the community with martial arts and self-defense. And it doesn't make much sense to call yourself a self-defense school if you don't have the ability to help somebody who needs it if that time comes. So thanks for coming out.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.